What celebrity suffered the worst fall from grace? Allison Mack, Bill Cosby, and Judd Fogel are all in jail. I think Fame to jail is a pretty big fall from grace, with Cosby the clear winner for falling furthest. It's one thing to lose your game. It's another thing entirely to lose your freedom. I was disgusted to read about Allison Mack. I grew up with Smallville in my teens, so my crush was always her / Chloe. 8 years later, it would be revealed Claire's sister Sarah had a 2009 relationship with Lama Tenzin Dondon, the Dalai Lama's gatekeeper who arranged the appearance, who as a monk had taken a vow of celibacy. What the? How does your cult sleep its way to the Dalai Lama of all people? Anywhere there is power, there is and/or transgressions. Even Buddhism is not exempt. There is a problem with in some monasteries, for example. The dirty little, big, secret of Tibetan Buddhism. Like monks the monks. Or monks women, older monks or younger monks. Kalu Rinpoche, one of the leaders of Tibetan Buddhism, like a cardinal, if you think of the Dalai Lama as Pope, not the best analogy but close enough, was a kid in the monastery, for example. Jeffrey Jones, best known for Mr. Rooney in Ferris Bueller and Mr. Deeds in Beetlejuice. He has had numerous problems with profession of child solicitation of child problems with registering and updating his registration. And finally problems with his employers, where people were invited to be on set, but parents and visitors were up in arms when they were not formally notified he was and on set. It was really weird when he showed up in the recent Deadwood movie which just came out in 2019. Jones was an ensemble character during the run of the show in the early 2000s before all of his stuff came to light. It seemed like he would not have been invited back for the reunion movie for obvious reasons. His arrest has already happened when Deadwood began. I remember being really surprised to see his acting at the time, since his arrest was so recent. By the way guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It will help us out quite a bit, and if you don't enjoy the videos in the future anymore, you can always unsubscribe. Let's get back to the video. In the sci-fi/fantasy realm, Marion Zimmer Bradley experienced a pretty big posthumous fall from grace. It turned out she her daughter from age 3 to 13 and ignored or actively supported her husband in numerous boys. Who? I never heard that. And that makes some of the morally ambiguous scenes in her books even grosser. It's so much worse than that. But what you posted is true. Yeah, the whole thing is beyond twisted and much worse than I could quickly summarize. Yes. I was unaware of the story and it's heartbreaking what this woman and her husband did behind closed doors for decades. The basic facts are horrible, but the full story is beyond the pale. Her husband was a founding member of NAMBLA, and she knew all about his previous when she married him, and then had 2 kids with him. Jimmy Savile. There's really no contest. The guy hundreds of children and even had with. He was the first to come to mind for me. Huge kids entertainer, given unrestricted access to kids in hospitals because of his charity associations, and used that to hundreds upon hundreds of children. Sure, he's dead, but his crimes were so freaking numerous that it is a scandal that he was able to just so many children and enabled to do so for so long and not get caught. Posthumous fall from grace for sure. My best friend told me she'd written to Jim Fix It asking for me and her to run our own restaurant for the day. I couldn't stop crying that night, and my poor mum had to spend hours convincing me it wasn't compulsory to go on the program, even if you were contacted. Because you knew he was or you were shy and got lucky? A mixture of being shy and thinking he was super creepy. I had only ever seen him on the TV and was too young to have even heard any of the rumors, young enough to think his full name was Jamal, but, like a lot of people, I clearly had that instinct that he was best avoided. Judd Fogel. Fame out of nowhere to convince As someone who lives in his old hometown, it apparently wasn't a huge surprise. He lost on the weight because he was stalking a high school girl who worked at that Subway. He also rented a second apartment to store all the he was selling to local college students. I was actually told this way back in the day by a random guy I was playing blackjack with in Vegas. He said the Subway guys would rue the day they hired that fat Judd guy when it came out what he was doing for money when he lost all that weight. As I recall it, the guy said Judd was running a site with a bunch of pirated content, and won't that look great on a sandwich ad? Turns out the guy was right, but off by a long shot about how bad it'd be. My childhood friend was his roommate in college and said Judd used to sell CD-ROMs of fund his meals at Subway. Likewise, he had his collection alphabetized on his computer. That's consistent with what that guy told me, and he too said he had personal knowledge of it. Your childhood friend of a gamble at Mandalay Bay? I may have made his passing acquaintance. This would have been years and years ago. Any of the child celebrities that were never given a chance at a normal life and ended up getting chewed up and spit out by the industry. Lindsay Lohan and Britney Spears come to mind, but there are many. Gotta say it. Amanda Bynes. Amanda Bynes and Lindsay Lohan are two I hate to see this happen to. They are both really great at what they do, and it sucks that it took a toll on them the way it did. I can't think of any Amanda Bynes movie that I saw that I didn't like. Seeing that downward spiral was horrible. It sucks that there are people out there who are willing to take advantage of kids. Read something a little while ago from Mara Wilson about how, right before she decided to stop acting as a kid, she was in Canada and going to be doing interviews, and someone was asking her questions, not a part of the interview, and she was being honest about how she didn't want to be there, something to that extent, and they wrote a horrible article about how she's a spoiled child actor. When she first came back as an adult and started talking about stuff, I thought she was a bit bitter towards her childhood. I don't think that anymore. I see that she is right to look back with some disdain for her childhood as an actor because of the way show business works for kids like her. I will always love Matilda though, and I'm glad she got out and got to grow up to be a mostly level-headed adult instead of ruined by or fame. Aaron Carter belongs on this list. The purest Tina Bopper heartthrob back in the day. Now, Nick Carter has to get a restraining order against him for threatening to hurt his kids. He's clearly dealing with the lowest of his lows. He did an igloo where him and a friend are driving around, hyping up Aaron. They go through a drive-thru, and Aaron gives the girl a concert tee with his face on it. She had no idea who he was. This is the first time I've heard or thought about Aaron Carter since the mid-2000s or so. I figured, like a lot of pop stars, he had a fairly successful run, then just quietly bowed out with his money and lived a normal life. Wow, had no idea this is what became of him. Saw Aaron once at the bar I worked at back in LA a few years ago. It was very clear that he was on more than just alcohol. Prior to that job, I had worked next to the restaurant that his NGF worked at with zero knowledge of her history with him. She was actually a very sweet girl. Just looked her up and looks like she's getting married in a few months to a relatively normal person. Happy for her. Ashley Judd got her career tanked because she pushed back Harvey Weinstein. She lost her chance with a role in Lotiar because of him, and she mostly vanished from the screens after he tagged her as a nightmare to work with. I was watching Double Jeopardy last week on TV and was thinking how she literally just disappeared. She was top billed in A-list movies, then suddenly only had bit parts in family films such as Dolphin Tale. Mira Sorvino's career was a similar career trajectory downfall thanks to Weinstein blacklisting her as well, if I remember right. Would love to see a movie with all the talented actresses whose career was ruined by him. Crazy how 30 Rock was making obviously Weinstein references by name throughout most of its 7-year run, and very few picked up on it. I always found it interesting that they make Mickey Rourke jokes too, but in the last season, IRRC, they made a point of having Jenna say that she has never met him in real life, and he had never done these things she said, but they never had a retraction for the Weinstein jokes. Not a classic celebrity, but Larry Nassar is a pretty astounding one. The most respected and trusted doctor in the elite gymnastics world had actually been grooming hundreds of gymnasts, and especially using it in the top end of the elite scene. Even at the Olympics themselves. And USA Gymnastics for doing nothing about it after years or reports. The training style that made it so easy to groom them, as he could just allow them to eat a small snack, and that was enough to be the kindest man and savior in their world, because the coaching was so horrendous. And somehow the people who facilitated this are still in control. So many vulnerable young girls were subjected to his miracle treatment. Apparently working for backs, hips, legs, groins, any injury you can think of, to help them sleep before international competitions, and waking up in his hotel room. He's a horrendous human. All these young girls with a dream. It's about the most vulnerable setting you can imagine, but a continuous flow of children. He makes me nauseous to think about. This was doubly horrifying for me. My daughter's gymnastics company was trying to move her into team competition gymnastics when the story broke. The time commitment and physical/dietary requirements they want to foist into a 6-year-old kid were shocking. Like, when is she supposed to go to school? Or, sleep. Shocking. One of the other moms gave me the evil eye and explained that obviously my daughter would need to be privately tutored, so school didn't interfere with her practice time. These people planned on relocating their family for Olympic training in a few years. We switched gyms to one run by a former Olympian who decided no other kid should go through what she went through as a kid. But I could totally see how the whole NASA thing would happen. People who would do literally anything the gymnastics company told them. Aaron Hernandez, if he counts as a celebrity. Star Patriots tight end, Super Bowl at 22. His last NFL game was an AFC Championship game 6 months later. He was arrested for murder. Convicted, sentenced to life without parole, committed in prison at 27. He was tried for 2 more murders and found not guilty, but there's a good chance he did it. The murder he did get convicted for made sense if he thought that guy was blabbing about the other 2 murders he was caught up and wanted to shut him up. Source: Aaron Hernandez suffered the most severe case of chronic traumatic encephalopathy ever discovered in a person his age, damage that would have significantly affected his decision making, judgment and cognition, researchers at Boston University revealed at a medical conference Thursday. Doctors found Hernandez had stage 3 CTE, which researchers had never seen in a brain younger than 46 years old. If you scroll down on the article, there is a picture comparing a normal brain to his brain. It's very bad. It's absolutely terrible. I love football, but they've got to figure out how to fix this mess. This is all very true, and football has a serious, possibly unsolvable, problem. But Hernandez had exacerbating factors. He had a genetic predisposition to neurodegenerative disease, he was regularly beaten as a child, and he got into a lot of violent fights. Lots of blows to the head, but probably not all football related in his case. It also has to be said that, while I don't doubt his CTE played a significant role in his decision making surrounding this murder, he was not exactly a Boy Scout prior to that. He had been running with bad crowds for years. There was a reason he fell to the Pats in the draft. People forget this now, since he's a rare case of someone who recovered from a fall from grace, but Robert Downey Jr. in the mid to late 90s. He'd gone from a revelatory Oscar-nominated performance in Chaplin to a national punching bag. His legal and who's made his name basically a punk line for just about everybody working in comedy at the time. Imagine the way Britney Spears was treated during her breakdown, except without anyone being a Craig Ferguson-esque voice of reason. His recovery, both his personal recovery and his public image, is really remarkable. His recovery, both his personal recovery and his public image is really remarkable. RDJ has always given a lot of credit to his assistant Jimmy Rich, had his own struggles with too, who passed away a couple of days ago in a car accident. He forced him into rehab and guided him throughout the whole process and eventually convinced him to get back into acting as well as to take up the Iron Man role. I guess this just speaks volumes about surrounding yourself with the right people. Jimmy was truly a blessing in disguise for RDJ. R.I.P. Jimmy Rich. Lane Staley, singer of Alice in Chains. He suffered from 4 years, but once his fiancée died in '96, he basically abandoned the band and accepted that his was going to kill him. He never got over her death. He was found in his apartment weeks after he died because he had blocked everyone out of his life. Truly such a loss to grunge and the music industry in general. And such a great guy that just didn't want to get better. My gift of self is my privacy is raked. And yet I find, repeating in my head. If I can't be my own, I'd feel better dead. Lane had a hard life. Mike Stair never forgave himself for leaving him the day before his death. I've heard that the only reason they went looking for him was because his accountant saw that there was no money coming out of his operating account. Supposedly they accepted that there was usually a slow trickle coming out, usually for but when the money stopped moving entirely, they knew he must be in trouble. Armie Hammer, I know he wasn't that big, but as the grandson of an oil tycoon and someone whose career was starting to taking off, I think his reputation will never recover, especially with all the new and disturbing info that has been released to the public. I don't think I've seen any other celeb being accused of cannibalism before. I'll never forgive him for possibly never getting a sequel to Uncle Now. Replace Armie with Charlie Hunnam or something. Guy Ritchie likes working with him, and he is better looking tbh. But the film was a box office bomb. Films that don't make money rarely get sequels. It wasn't a bomb as such, it just about broke, even, but that was only after all the streaming revenue after several years. The problem was that it was meant to be a massive success and it just whimpered at the box office. The other problem was that it was going to cost a fortune to make a sequel as the other actors got even bigger, Cavill, Vikander, Debicki, and would have commanded bigger paychecks second time around. Milli Vanilli. Like everybody else, I gave them a lot of at the time. But I think a lot of people world jumped at the chance they were given. And they almost seemed relieved once the jig was up. I think it's a little unfair that all the rage fell on them, and the people who thought up the scheme didn't catch more flack. About the only good thing that came out of it was MTV Unplugged. Fab Morvan and Rob Pilatus were kept in the dark as long as possible. Producer Frank Farian booked recording sessions for them and strung them along. When someone else's voice was on the recording during rehearsals, Farian told them that was just a temporary thing until the audio editing on their performance was finished. The two of them didn't know it was a fraud until the record got released. And by then the pressure was enormous to go along with it. Without that contract they were just a couple of broke guys. Recently it has to be Hilaria Baldwin, wife of Alec Baldwin. She pretended for years she was Spanish, featured regularly in Hala Magazine as Best Dressed Latina, hosted a successful podcast, and was a correspondent on an entertainment channel. Turned out she faked her Spanish heritage completely. She was pretty much disowned by all her sponsors and doesn't appear TV anymore. She now spends her time uploading 1,000 Instagram stories a day of her children. Edit. Thank you to whoever it was from r/Hilaria Baldwin for the gold haha. Like Rachel Dolezal? Yes. Exactly the same. But instead of acknowledging and apologizing, she's doing softcore pretending to breastfeed when the kids are clearly not latched to her boob. There are serious concerns about her mental health and ability to parent at this point. And adopting a baby Bengal cat, possibly having it declawed, and letting it crawl over her newborn baby's head. It's become some major Tiger King since the scandal broke. And she was some sort of Peter Spokesperson at one point. Adopting makes it sound like she did something commendable. Hillary bought an expensive designer cat from an elite breeder who brags about their celebrity clientele on their website because she's too important to adopt a perfectly fine kitten from a shelter. A shelter cat? Not for Hillary. Those are for us peasants only. The Douglas Mayo. I don't feel sorry for them, they did it to themselves. I gotta say, this is one fall from grace I'm enjoying immensely. They've basically disowned one daughter that they did not protect after she by her brother for basically forming her opinions and having a voice. Yet they protect their son who molested of his own sisters and downloaded some of the worst child FBI agent has seen in 13 years. The father makes any potential spouse fill out a 50-page questionnaire to see if he will approve a marriage. All adult kids must be chaperoned while they are courting, and the father keeps all money the family makes, despite pimping out his family for 15 plus years. I'm just waiting for the skeletons to fall out of Jim Bob's closet, cause I have a feeling they may make Josh's look minor in comparison. TBF, the Duggars always had something off about them. People just never knew what skeletons they were hiding in the closet, and nobody expected them to be that bad when they did get exposed. This isn't the biggest celebrity fall, because he's not a big celebrity, but Ian Watkins is quite the red. He was the frontman of alt-rock band Lost Prophets, and they had decent popularity on the 2000s. In the shortest way I can put it, among other things, he tried babies as young as 13 months old. Their mothers were complicit and were allowing him to do it and talk about it and got convicted with him. What the hell did I just read? It's exactly what it says. There is court transcript available to read, but I warn you, read at your own risk. It's unbelievably graphic. I just read the wiki, and that man never needs to see the light of day again. I would argue that the mothers needs a harsher punishment. It's one thing to be a reprehensible creep. It's another thing to be a trusted guardian of a completely helpless infant and to be willingly allow someone perform the acts described in the transcript. Not counting genocidal dictators, I struggle to find a more perfect personification of evil. That happened in 2012/13. Those kids are around 8 years old today. If they haven't been told already, imagine if they find out later in life, because I'm almost sure whoever their current guardian is has lied to them, why their mothers are in jail. Just pure evil. R. Kelly. I obviously don't need to explain why, but it's really unbelievable how influential he was, and Locustiles, to R&B music. Like he may just be the most important singer of that entire genre within the last 40 years, and yet everything he's done has all but erased his once untouchable legacy. Most people were willing to look away at peeing on a girl. But the girl was 13. No way were people going to look away at that. Mayo, what are you talking about? People looked away from it for a decade and a half because he kept making good music. Most of his best work came after his prosecution a 13-year-old girl and videoing him. The Boondocks made an episode about it even. Literally everyone knew and has known. Elizabeth Holmes. Maybe not a celebrity by traditional standards, but widely considered the next big thing in tech. She claimed to have developed a new method of blood testing that was set to revolutionize the medical industry. She raised billions in capital, only to be proven a fraud, and is now indicted on federal charges. The lady thought she was the next Steve Jobs and frequently wore black turtlenecks and intentionally modified her voice to sound less feminine. A true sociopath. What makes it really bad is she still had the chance to bow out of the industry with her money. Even though it didn't work, fine, things don't always work. It was a case of she could have bowed out, continued to work, and try again. Instead she knowingly pressed forward with the fraud. I mean, this isn't news to you, but it was something I only learned recently. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys for staying with me till the end. If you enjoyed watching this, you might as well watch these too.